The Nazgûl, the most horrible servants of Sauron. Once they were counted among the greatest lords of men, but now they are little more than slaves to their master's will. They were Sauron's most reliable scouts, most feared assassins, and most trusted generals, using powerful spells and weapons to enforce his will. And perhaps the most iconic of their weapons are the infamous Morgul Blades. It was one of these blades that wounded Frodo on Weathertop, nearly dooming the hobbits to a fate much worse than mere death. But what was this cruel artefact? What powers did it have? And what would have happened to Frodo if he hadn't been healed by Lord Elrond? Be welcomed and gather round, Meldonyar. I am happy to see so many of you here again for this chapter, and I hope to see you all return again next time, when we will take a look at another being of evil, so dark and terrifying, it even scared Melkor. But today I will tell you about these dreadful weapons that could enslave the very souls of their victims. The Morgul Blades. When and by whom the Morgul Blades were created is unknown. However, since it is certain that they came from Mordor, one can assume that they were forged by perhaps the Witch King or even by Sauron himself. So it may very well be that these infamous weapons were already over 4,000 years old by the time of the War of the Ring. And infamous they were, for if a human was merely wounded by a Morgul blade, the wound would be fatal. For although the wound itself could be treated, the after effects were virtually incurable. Long before the War of the Ring began, the 11th steward of Gondor, named Boromir, suffered such a wound. And yes, the Boromir, son of Denethor, that you know from the Fellowship of the Ring, was named after this hero. But although Boromir the Steward was considered the mightiest warrior of his time, and even the Witch King feared him, it was but a small wound from a Morgul blade that eventually killed him. For after he received that cut in his wars with the Witch King, he became shrunken with an incurable pain and died decades younger than any of his kin, withering away after having ruled Gondor for only 12 years. But this wasn't even the worst part of the Morgul Blades, as Frodo was to find out firsthand. The fateful hour was on October 6th, 3018 of the Third Age. The four hobbits had camped with Strider on the outskirts of Weathertop, where they were attacked in the night by the Witch King and 4 other Nazgûl. In Peter Jackson's retelling of the event, it is hardly clear, but in the books, the immense power the Witch King used to force Frodo to put the One Ring on his finger becomes obvious. In the world of Tolkien, all humans, elves and dwarves consist of a body and a soul. While the body exists in the physical, visible world, the soul resides in an almost parallel dimension, one we call the Realm of Shadows. Now, as Frodo placed the One Ring on his finger, his body was thrust into the cusp between the two worlds. Thus, he had become invisible to all living creatures, but had become clearly visible to the Nazgûl, who resided exclusively in the Shadow Realm through the power of their rings. Those who were in the Shadow Realm and could see within it also became aware of the true nature of the Morgul Blades, for, invisible to the eyes of the living, evil scriptures were engraved onto their hilts, describing their curse and binding the black magic to that weapon so that the Morgul blade glowed with a pale light in the Shadow Realm. And now that Frodo was drawn into the Shadow Realm, that weapon's curse had the fullness of its power to afflict the young hobbit. because when the Witch King attacked him and managed to pierce his shoulder, the tip of the Morgul blade broke off. And while the rest of the blade soon disintegrated, leaving only the hilt, the broken splinter remained in Frodo's wound, digging itself through the hobbit's flesh towards his heart. Thus, Frodo was plagued by a crippling pain. A dying cold spread from his shoulder, and at night he had terrible fevered dreams. It went on like this for 17 agonizing days, during which Frodo's condition continued to deteriorate as the splinter burrowed itself deeper and deeper into his wound. The closer he got to his heart, the more Frodo began to fade away. Luckily for him, they managed to bring him in time to Rivendell, where Frodo was healed by Lord Elrond, who removed the splinter from the wound and melted it down. But in those 17 days, he had progressed so far that Frodo, and especially his left hand, appeared slightly translucent to the discerning eye. His body was now, to a small extent, in the Shadow World. Had Frodo not been healed, the Morgul shard would have pierced his heart only a short time later. Frodo's body would then have been drawn completely into the Shadow World by that black magic, and he would have met the same fate as the Nazgûl. In essence, he would have been like them, but far weaker. He would have been permanently in the Shadow World, forever exposed to the Ringwraiths and Sauron, who would torture him to far beyond his breaking point, until, perhaps, at some point, they would grant him the sweet mercy of death. Frodo only narrowly escaped this horrible fate. It was only thanks to the fact that he had fought the Witch King to the last on Weathertop, and had thus made the Nazgûl Lord miss his heart with his thrust, that he could, in the end, be saved. However, not even Lord Elrond himself was able to heal him for good. Every time Frodo came near the Witch King, he felt the pain of his wound. And even after the War of the Ring was won, and Sauron and the Witch King were defeated forever, Frodo fell deadly ill every year on the anniversary of his injury. This condition would have killed him soon in Middle-earth. It was only when he was granted passage to Valinor that he could truly be healed and spend his last days in blissful peace, until he finally passed away peacefully, and his spirit, freed from the chains of the Shadow Realm, left the world of Arda forever. Thus we conclude this chapter and this video. Did the knowledge surprise you? Let us know in the comments. If you enjoyed it and would like to learn more of the inner workings of Arda, be sure to subscribe and click the bell icon to be notified of the next chapter in the Mysteries of Westerness, and learn what it was that managed to leave Melkor Morgoth, the original Dark Lord, scared. Now, I have been Irchikor Kuruvane, and I wish you all Namarie Meldunjar.